Hi, my friends. Today I want to present you a new story. Enjoy watching it.
The afternoon light slanted across Piper's kitchen table, turning the envelope in my hands into a small, golden thing. Inside was the check, $250,000, the last tangible evidence of my late husband Mark's love for us. My fingers trembled as I slid it across to her. "You're sure about this, Mom?" Piper's voice was soft, almost reverent. "I'm sure," I said, watching her husband Kevin's eyes flick to the numbers before he caught himself. "Your father worked for this. He'd want you to have a real home." Kevin gave me a firm handshake, his smile tight. "We'll make you proud. You'll always have a place here." The house was beautiful, white brick, sprawling porch, tall oaks lining the drive. My guest suite was small, tucked away on the ground floor, but it smelled faintly of fresh paint and promise. That first night, Piper opened a bottle of cheap champagne. We toasted in mismatched mugs, and I told myself I finally found where I belonged. The first week felt like a honeymoon of sorts. Kevin brewed coffee each morning, and Piper lingered over breakfast with me, talking about paint colors and garden plans. I started sketching ideas for the flower beds. But then, changes. One afternoon, I went to get milk from the fridge, only to find a shiny new padlock on the door. Oh, it's just for Kevin to limit his food intake. He's on a diet right now. 2 days later, the Wi-Fi stopped working. When I asked for the new password, Kevin chuckled without looking up from his laptop. "We'll get it to you later." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the muffled sound of their laughter drifting down the hall. A cold unease crept in, one I tried to shake. But a small voice whispered in the dark, "This is not what was promised." And deep down, I knew the voice was right. The changes became sharper, harder to ignore. A lock on the fridge could be excused. No internet for a week, perhaps an oversight. But the way Piper's eyes avoided mine at breakfast, that was harder to explain. One rainy evening, I paused in the hallway outside the living room. Their voices were low, but the walls in that house carried secrets like wind through leaves. "She's too comfortable," Kevin murmured. "She thinks she can just stay," Piper replied, her tone clipped. "We need our space, Kev. We're starting a family. She'll understand, eventually." I stood frozen, my hand pressed against the wallpaper, my chest aching. "Our space." The words were like ice water down my spine. The next day, Piper avoided eye contact entirely. When I suggested making lasagna for dinner, she smiled faintly and said, "Don't worry about it, Mom. We've got plans." That night, I went into my small suite and pulled out my folder, the deed showing my 49% ownership, the bank papers, and the check stub from Mark's life insurance. Proof that I wasn't just a guest. Proof that I belonged here. I laid them neatly on the bed like armor, though I suspected I'd need more than paper to shield me from what was coming. 2 days later, it happened. Piper and Kevin stood in the doorway to my room, their faces an uneasy blend of resolve and awkwardness. "Mom," Piper began, "we think it's time you found your own place. This isn't working anymore." I looked at her for a long moment, the girl I had raised, the girl whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose hair I had braided before school. "Understood," I said finally, my voice steady. I gathered my folder, a small suitcase, and walked past them into the rainy night. They didn't know that I left with more than clothes. I left with a decision. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and stale air. Its single window overlooked a flickering neon sign that buzzed all night, as restless as my thoughts. I stacked my folder of documents on the bedside table. It was my anchor now, my only defense in a war I hadn't chosen. 3 days after I left, a call came from a bank representative. Her voice was polite but brisk. "Mrs. Reeves, I'm calling regarding a $79,000 business loan secured against the house at 14 Maple Lane. The loan is in default. Are you aware?" My grip on the phone tightened. "No," I said slowly. "But I am a co-owner of that property." The pause on the other end told me she hadn't expected that. "Then you should know foreclosure proceedings will begin unless the debt is paid in full." A picture began forming in my mind. Kevin's sudden interest in privacy, Piper's coldness. The fuse had been lit long before they told me to leave. That evening I walked to a diner across the street, my folder tucked under my arm. In the corner booth, I spread the papers like a map of betrayal. The deed, the insurance check, the loan documents I'd requested from the bank. They had mortgaged our shared home for a doomed business venture, and when it failed, I became a liability to be removed. I thought of calling Piper, demanding answers, but I already knew the script: excuses, half-truths, and just enough guilt to make me question myself. Instead, I made my own call to the bank. I will not be covering the debt, I told the representative firmly. Proceed as you see fit. Ma'am, that means. Yes, I understand perfectly. The fuse was burning fast now, sparks hissing toward the powder keg. Later, lying in the stiff motel bed, I felt no regret. There are moments in life when silence is not surrender, but strategy. They had lit the fire. I would simply step aside and let it burn. The foreclosure notice arrived with a dull thud of finality. I didn't need to open it to know what it said. The house on Maple Lane was no longer theirs, or mine. That afternoon, my phone lit up with Piper's name. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mom, her voice wavered, though not from sorrow. How could you let this happen? We're losing everything. You mortgaged the house without telling me, I said calmly. You locked me out of my home. Everything after that was your choice. I'm not turning my back, I replied. I'm closing a door you slammed first. The next week, they launched their own campaign, social media posts about betrayal, tearful phone calls to extended family. I became the villain in their carefully scripted tragedy. I stayed silent until I didn't. At a quiet Sunday gathering at my sister's house, I arrived with my folder. While the kettle whistled, I laid out the papers, the life insurance check, the co-ownership deed, the loan default notice. The room grew still as eyes scanned the pages. My daughter and her husband, I said evenly, asked me to leave the home I helped buy. Then they mortgaged it into debt and expected me to pay for the mistake. My sister pressed her lips into a thin line. They've been telling people you abandoned them. I met her gaze. No, I finally refused to be used. Days later, Piper appeared at my motel with a cake and a bottle of French wine. She smiled too brightly. Let's talk, Mom, she urged. We can fix this. I studied her face, the performance, the rehearsed warmth. This isn't about fixing. It's about you wanting something again. Her smile faltered. I stepped back into the doorway, my hand firm on the frame. I'm not letting you in. The latch clicked, and I turned the deadbolt. The sound was sharper than I expected, like the last note in a song you never wanted to hear again. The last door had closed, and I had locked it. Ultimately, having lost their home, Piper and Kevin lost their mother for good. They were forced to live in the dirtiest, cheapest rental accommodation with cockroaches inside. With the money left over from Mark's insurance, I bought a small apartment in a condo on the outskirts of town with a view of the sea. The condo was small but filled with light. Mornings began with the shimmer of water beyond my balcony, the lake's surface shifting with every breath of wind. Here, silence wasn't heavy, it was healing. I filled my days with painting classes, yoga by the shoreline, and walks through the little farmer's market. People smiled without asking for anything. I'd almost forgotten what that felt like. One crisp autumn afternoon, as I sketched the lake's rippling edge, my phone buzzed. Piper's name glowed on the screen. I let it ring until the sound faded into stillness. That evening, my neighbor June stopped by with a jar of her homemade peach preserves. You've got the best view in the building, she said, peering toward the horizon. It's more than a view, I replied. It's proof I survived. She tilted her head. From what? I smiled faintly. From believing love means letting people hurt you. The sun slipped lower, scattering gold across the water. I thought of the house on Maple Lane, now belonging to strangers. I thought of the cake, the wine, the practiced smiles. And then I thought no more of them at all. I dipped my brush into a swirl of cobalt blue, painting a lake as it was in that moment, calm, endless, untouched by the past. For the first time in years, the picture felt complete.
Friends, what do you think of this story? Write your opinion in the comments. Would you like more stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button so you don't miss any videos. See you tomorrow.